Welcome to episode 43 of the Necronomicon.com.
Half a minute for half a nation.
Hey everybody, this is Thomas Brungart from the podcast Why Was This Popular? Today we're talking about Train to Busan. It has all of the zombie realism of Shaun of the Dead and all of the laughs of 28 Days Later. Currently they're making a sequel, so I recommend seeing this movie right now. That way when the sequel comes out and wins an Oscar, you can tell everybody, I saw the original one years ago. Thanks.
I am James Sabata, horror author, screenwriter, co-host of the podcast you're listening to right now, and I love trains.
And I am Don Guillory, author, historian, educator, co-host of this podcast. And the U.S. really needs to get its stuff together with regard to trains, because I've been on trains in Europe and in China, and there's no comparison. So if zombies that do hit the train system here, or you have to escape via train, you're not going to make it in the United States.
Joining us today is author MichaelBrent Collings. MichaelBrent, you've been here before. You did the Insidious episode with us, and you still took a chance and came back, so that's awesome. Thank you.
You're welcome. I prepared this time, though. I'm nude.
Whoa. We can be nude? No
That
one ever
makes two
told
of
me
us.
this.
Well, I'm wearing a tie.
Oh, well, that's different.
A long
Wait,
tie.
side note, did you notice that if you happen to be naked, but you're wearing shoes, you feel more naked than if you were naked?
And for me, it's socks. Like, I can't do the naked with socks thing. That is an aberration and something you can literally go to hell for. The only thing I can think of worse than that is like going to the bathroom and sitting down and doing your thing naked with socks on. I think that is actually how Lucifer got cast out of heaven.
Don, to your point, I do believe that if I just wore socks while I was naked, my neighbor would stand a higher chance of seeing me and then being like, that motherfucker was naked in his backyard. But worse, he had these terrible high tops on.
There you go.
Don't
wear those things that separate your toes into 5 little fingers, like they're ninja feet for yuppies. If you were wearing that and I saw you naked, I wouldn't even see the nudity. I'd be just like, stupid shoes. Like, that's the only thing I'd see.
You just need to call the police at that point.
Oh, it's terrible.
Buy our new shirt, Cocks and Crocs. All right, so
people would buy that,
right? Definitely. But yeah, why don't you tell our listeners about what you do, your books, and all that good stuff, so that they know why you're here today. No.
Well, in case it wasn't already obvious from the hilarity, my name's MichaelBrent Collings, and I'm an internationally best-selling horror author and produced horror screenwriter, and I write other stuff too. I've had varying degrees of success with other genres, but horror is kind of my home base, and I love talking about it. And you guys are always a hoot, so I was so happy with that. In retrospect, I was happy we met up at that con, even though the experience itself was terrible. But afterwards, it turned out you guys were pretty good, and we've had some good times.
In fairness, I tried to tell you while we were following you that it was okay, but you kept yelling, get away, and spraying things at us. So
I forgot my rape whistle that day, so it was super awkward. I'm probably getting in trouble for this, huh?
No.
Okay.
I mean, I just tried to sell a shirt that said Cocks and Crocs.
That's true.
I mean, come on.
All right, you already got rid of the low-hanging fruit. So I write horror stuff. You can find me on my website, writteninsomnia.com. Written Insomnia, stories to keep you up all night, or just Google my first name, since I'm the only Michael Brent in the world.
That's a pretty cool claim to fame, by the way.
It is. That is probably the only thing I'll be best at in my whole life, is just being Michael Brent.
Well, I mean, if it helps, my dad, my grandpa, my great-grandfather have my name. So, I mean, that's just in my family. I don't even get to be the best James Sabata. So
yeah.
who knows about it in the whole world?
And that's why actually people are like, do you go by your full name? And they're ready for me to go, no, of course not, because I'm not an idiot. But I do, and it's because like there are so many Michaels in my family. My son's name is Michael, my dad's, my brother-in-law, my cousin. So this way I go by Michael Brent, and at least at family gatherings, I know who's yelling at me. And it's just handy that way.
So as always, I always make every guest tell us why they picked the episode that they picked. Don just sent me a picture of a rooster wearing Crocs, and it says "Cops with Crocs."
Rad.
And now I can't even keep a straight face.
That
So
should be
I
your
always
logo.
We'll add it to the merch.
we'll have to design our own for copyright reasons.
Oh my gosh.
But no, so we always have the guests tell us why they picked this film, and you totally suggested this one. You had no influence from me, even though I have wanted to do this film probably since the beginning of this podcast.
I chose it because for the same reason you guys probably want to do it. It's awesome. I mean, like there are movies that I watch and I really enjoy, and I know I'll watch them again maybe once or twice. Like as background when I'm writing, sometimes if I get stuck for an idea or something, I'll have a movie of that genre in the background. And there's movies where I go, yeah, this is good background noise. And then there's movies that I watch and go, I'll watch this again. That was pretty good. And then there's movies that go into permanent rotation. And Train to Busan is definitely one of them. Yeah. And it is so good. Like my father-in-law and I, before all the coronavirus stuff started, we would get together every couple of weeks and I would show him a horror movie. And the first dubbed or subtitle one I showed him was Train to Busan. And my wife's like, yeah, my dad's not going to go for that. He is not a read during the movie kind of person. And that's not to like rip on him. Just there's people who can do that and people who don't. Sure. And, she asked, I was like, we'll try it. And the next day she goes, how'd it go? And I was like, he was so into it from moment one, because it's just a rad movie. So I've seen it like 6 times. And every time I know somebody who hasn't seen it, I'm like, we should watch Train to Busan because it's just so good.
It is. Yeah.
So good. So good. And it's got what, it really is much more of a disaster movie. Like a lot of horror zombie movies really focus on the horror. And in this one, I think the zombies are a lot more of a natural disaster kind of thing. And it has so much heart because most of the time natural disaster movies, you get paint by numbers characters and the disaster. But you go back to like the Poseidon Adventure. And the reason that's a classic is because you can remember all those characters. And Train to Busan just had such cool, memorable characters. And the social commentary is there so deeply embedded in the character. It's just wonderful.
Oh, yeah. I think I've probably seen this 5 times. And to this day, and I mean, we're going to talk about this, but when I hit the end of this film, I'm always teary.
Oh, my gosh.
This film gets me so fucking hard.
Right.
Every time. What about you, Don? Have you seen this several times, or was this your first?
No. I've seen this probably about the same amount, 5-6 times. I don't get weepy at the ending. I'm more angry because when I watch movies like this, it's one of those things where I'm like, I'm glad. And of course, spoiler alert for anybody who's listening, the movie's going to get spoiled for you if you haven't watched it.
Oh yeah.
With the 2 people, or I guess technically 3 people who survive, just watching it and like having it down to those 2, I'm glad they made it, but it was still one of those moments of all the people that were lost in the film because of either bad choices, self-sacrifice, somebody else's selfishness, poor judgment, just all those things that are there. And it makes me mad because I just sit there and think like, if this were a real situation, this is how people would probably react. And it's, I don't know you, because even the first time where Soo-yeon and her dad are saved by a couple other passengers, the one passenger and his pregnant wife are trying to escape the zombies. They just saved them.
Mm-hmm.
And she simply said, when they're trying to close the gate for their part of the train, and she yells out, I know him.
Yeah.
And that's the thing that saves the guys, that not that he had just saved them, but the fact that the little girl had a conversation with him and he was nice to her.
Yeah.
And so she's like, no, don't let this guy, as opposed to other people's kind of like, which comes up later in the film. Oh, well, we don't know if they've been bitten. We don't know who they are. Leave them back there to die.
Yeah. Or just straight saying they have been bitten, even though it was nonsense.
But just the selfishness that human beings are known for historically in situations like this, and current situations, depending on where you are, on the map.
Yeah. Totally true. And I have to say, I love that you brought up that moment with Suan and the Sanghua, the father to be, who is, first of all, if you had to tell me to pick one character who is instantly likable because of the actor, it's that one. I mean, the character is well written, but that dude, it just brings the perfect level of physicality and comedy. And he's like, you're watching movies and there's people who you just don't want to look at because there's something about them that bugs you. And there's people that you go, yeah, that's like a super hot person. And you can tell whether you're attracted to, like Idris Elba, dude, he's freaking hot. Right. And then you look at him, he was like, he's got this appeal. He's this really attractive, charismatic actor that you could also picture just hanging out with. He's not unapproachable. He's not Idris Elba hot, but like, if he went to a bar with you, he'd be going home with the girl that he wanted, or, whatever it is, because he's just oozes that kind of level of confidence and cool. So he is a huge percentage of the reason that I love the movie so much. I mean, all of the elements work so well. But the first time I watched it, the second he came on screen, I was like, well, I'm in. I am 100% invested.
Yeah, I mean, even the way he conveys the personality, he says so much about how this guy feels just with his movements or like where he puts his arm in relationship to his pregnant wife to protect her, like even when he's not thinking about protecting her, it's just habit or whatever you want to call it. And like he just does so many little nuances that make this character just fucking great.
Yeah, it's a wonderful character.
I mean, fantastic casting. I don't think that this character is as lovable if he's not the actor.
Absolutely.
I don't think there's anything that special about how the character is written. It is 100% this actor.
Yeah, it's like, think about if Tom Selleck had been cast as Indiana Jones, and I think Tom Selleck is, and I think he's really fun. He was great as Magnum PI, and he's done a lot of cool stuff, but he would not be a good Indiana Jones. And so I think, this character was well done. I love how he never says anything on the nose. He is the most subtexty character, and some of that is the acting. Right. But some of it's just the writing. I mean, that little scene where, first of all, he says, you don't want to go in there. She's peeing for two. It's going to be a while, and I watched it with my son and he's like, what does that mean? And I go, I knew instantly because I'm a dad. And like the pregnant chick is peeing. Do not get in the way of that action. And it was just such a nice moment because it said, hey, first and foremost, I'm a husband and dad right from the very beginning. And he just layered in so well. Even when the main character, Seok-woo, I'm going to say all their names badly. I'm sorry, I'm not Korean.
I'm not even going to try.
Yeah, the main guy, when he's like ripping on the father to be's cell phone tone, he's like, it's not a stupid tone. Why? How do you change it? And it was just it had this wealth of like, hey, I'm really prideful. But I'm aware I have gaps. Can you help me out here maybe, but don't make a big thing of it or I will beat you to death, and it was just, the character is so much fun. And he has got, again, spoiler, he has got one of the most triumphant death scenes of all time.
Right.
Just so cool the way he just saves everyone. The look in his eyes, he's like, well, I'm dead. And the part that I tear up the most at is when he calls to his wife the baby's name.
Yes.
And, that's everything. That's a father saying goodbye to a child he'll never know. That's the husband saying, I love you and I'm going to make sure you get out of this alive. And oh my God, if they had killed the mom, the pregnant lady, I would have flown to Korea and set fire to the makers of the movie. I mean, it was given the choice, I was even like, well, the little girl, she's super cute, but that's kind of her character. She's the selfless, innocent one, and I hope she makes it. But the pregnant lady better frickin' make it.
And even the way that he reacts with the young girl, like he instantly establishes that he's gonna be a good dad.
Yeah.
Like he doesn't know this girl. He's known her for 4 seconds.
Mm-hmm.
And he's totally like, he's leaning down to talk to her, like kind of getting on her level, and he's like, he's very gentle with her and he's making jokes while still giving her information. And he's just already such a good dad.
Yeah.
And I guess that's writing, so I shouldn't put it completely on the actor, but he has a large part of that too.
Totally. No,
and
everything that he did was so good.
Just fucking great. I love this character so much. And even the first time I saw it, like I was like 2 minutes into it and I totally love this character. And I'm like, he is so fucked because I like him way too much.
I like
it was the Game of Thrones logic.
Here's my single favorite moment, not the teary-eyed, but the one where I've stood up and I did like the manly, like fist pumping, like I have participated in the Viking raid. And it's when he body slams the guy or the zombie into the freaking ceiling. And he's so physical, you buy it. I mean, like, the physics of it is nonsense. Nobody is strong enough to do that. But he does it, and you're like, well, he's a dad. He probably can.
It's the new dad strength.
Yeah. The wife can pull a baby off, out from under a car, lift the car up, and dads, we have the adrenalized ability to body slam zombies into the ceiling.
Boy, I'm glad I don't have to prove that anytime in the future.
Yeah, it doesn't come up as much as the car thing, so we don't get much credit for it. Honey, I could body slam a zombie into the... Shut up! Okay, well. I actually did the car thing. Yeah, that's fair.
But yeah, I mean, everything about him is great, and even, like, the characterization of each character is so well done in this. You were talking about how with disaster films, a lot of times they're very flat and we don't really care about them. Or we have like one family that we follow, that sort of thing. But I mean, I empathize. I totally empathize with like the baseball player kid,
Yeah.
And he doesn't have a lot of screen time before this to make me care about him. But when it gets to the part where like all of his friends are zombies and he has to battle his way through there. Yeah.
So rough.
I mean,
and the reason we like him is because of the girlfriend. I mean, and this is the girlfriend I wish I could have modeled off of in high school, just like as a human being, like the way she sits down, everyone's mocking her. She doesn't even pay him attention, sits down next to the boy. She like takes his AirPods, like, what are we listening to? You should just get used to this. This is fate and I'm with you now, and I was just like watching her going, she's the raddest person ever.
Right. Yeah, and that's true. Maybe that is why we care more about him. But yeah, that's another scene that really gets to me when I talk about the teary-eyed. That scene doesn't quite get me teary-eyed, but like sitting there going, holy shit, could I bash Don in the head with a baseball bat if he was a zombie? I mean, probably.
I could.
But do I want to find out?
When you say, do you want to find out, is that like, do I want to find out? Rhetorical question, or is this one of those wink wink moments where we set each other up with the person that we want to kill?
I think that's what he's doing right now, because even when we prepped, I was like, man, I said, if it were my mom, I have a hard time doing it. I said, but I think I would. If it was my daughter, it's going to be a while for me to sit there and think about, I don't know if I can pull this one off.
Yeah, but you know what? That's different. That's one of the things that drove me nuts in The Walking Dead when Herschel's got the big, huge barn full of zombies in the beginning, and his kid or his wife, or I forget who is one of them. But I'm like, you know what? That is a lot of nonsense. And at some point, you're like, yeah, your nose has fallen off. You're probably not there anymore. But with him, the kid, it's much more immediate. So yeah, I felt for it. And I did hate how he and the girl went out. That has died, because I know what the social commentary was talking about is kind of the trapped way youth relationships are handled a lot of the time in Korea. And this is a very purposefully socially commenting movie. So I get what they were trying to do, but it still bugged me because, again, it's like the girl's bleeding out. If my wife, whom I adore, I mean, but she's dead or dying, and there's this plague thing that's going to make her wake up and bite my face off, I'm going to say goodnight, give her a quick kiss on a not bloody part, and leave. And she'd probably be like, you need to go. And so the part where he just kind of cuddles her at the end and then she eats him, I was like, he is an idiot. So I'm going to go with that one.
Well, she did say they were fate and they were going to be together. So
yeah. And again, the social commentary is there and it made sense, but it just, whenever somebody walks into the death scene on purpose, I have a real hard time sympathizing. Right. If they're sacrificing for somebody else, cool. Or even if it's like, I'm so depressed, I'm going to end it. I get that. But if it's somebody who has just been a part of the whole movie or the whole series and they're like, no, I'm going to do the stupidest possible thing in this moment, I just go, well, I guess I'm glad you're gone, because sooner or later you would have done something even stupider according to this moment. So he was the only one that I had real trouble when he died, as far as I couldn't care about it.
Yeah. Well, you mentioned that you have a comparable scene with the two sisters where one of the sisters she's been left behind and she ends up turned to a zombie because she was trying to save the group. But the sister with the perm, I think it was Soo Jun. She's sitting there. She sees her sister is a zombie, but it's almost like she's a confused zombie because she's sitting there with a glazed look on her face, like, should I bite people? Should I leave people alone? You know what? I'm just going to stand here with everybody else. Rah, 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 rah. I'm going to sit here and be a zombie. But you weren't sold on her being one. Like, she hadn't fully changed. Yeah. But the sister starts giving this discussion or having this monologue where she talks about, oh, you're so dumb. You're always thinking of people before yourself. I can't believe. Look at what happened to you now. And then she sees how, like, how things have been going and says, fuck it, I'm going to go ahead and open up the door. Yeah. I want to be with you. I can't live without my sister. And then two, maybe this is the way it's supposed to be. And the folks that need to be bitten get bitten. Yeah. And I wasn't even mad with her when she did that.
No. And they layered it in from the very beginning when she's like, in the old days, they would have been re-educated. I mean, she's already had it with everybody in seconds. Yes. And then plus, they've layered in, like, she can't even eat without her sister. I mean, her sister feeds her throughout the whole thing. Her sister makes her sit down. So I think there's also an element of, I don't know what I'm going to do next. So I might as well, I suspect I'll have a better quality of life as a zombie with my sister than I would by myself as a human. So here we go. So that moment, I was like, I thought that was great. I loved it. And it was so perfect just to get rid of all those scumbags who essentially lock themselves in a death trap. That was fantastic.
You were talking about the cultural context of the two teens holding each other. Uh-huh. I'm not really aware of that. Can you walk me through that?
Okay, so the whole movie, I mean, this came out right around, I think, Snowpiercer. And both of them are very consciously talking about social strata and things in Korea. And Snowpiercer was a lot more on the nose. That's one about the train and the people in the back have to kind of travel forward and things get more luxurious and hedonistic the farther forward on the train they go. And this one was a lot more elegant, I thought. It was the whole thing was caused by people who were being greedy. So the first thing that happens is this evil corporation, followed by the corporation trying to cover it up and the government buying into it and doing what the corporation said, which is, first of all, it actually happened. Like, there was, I don't know if you guys know about it, but there was a ferry that capsized off Korea, and it was run by this Korean company, and 600 people died. It turned out that the reason they died was because the company had cut all these corners to cost save and things like that. But the real tragedy was the company said to the news media and the state, nobody died. And they ran with it. I mean, it wasn't for a while until it was kind of discovered and leaked that, hundreds of people died. And so this movie is mirroring that. Like, every bad thing happens as a natural process of corporate corruption that flows to the media and to the government who make it worse, and sort of the microcosm of that within the train was the fact that, and it drove me nuts when I was watching it the first time until I realized what they're doing, that the business guy, who just as fast as I liked the dad to be, I hated the business guy that fast.
Oh, yeah.
The CEO guy, and he just leans in and grabs the microphone from the conductor who's in charge, and he's like, don't stop. Hey, this is me. And it's not established that he's like the president of, Microsoft randomly traveling on the train. He's just some important corporate guy as far as they know. But because of that, he says, don't stop, go straight through to Busan. Give me the mic. Whatever he says to do, they do. And so it's really harping on the fact that this is a problem in Korean life, is that there really is such a thing as fake news. There really is such a thing as the government just going, well, we like the corporations better than people. And so it talks about that throughout. And then it's also talking about the social stratification problems that they continually have. I mean, if you'll notice, the first person who tells them bad stuff is going on is the homeless guy.
Right.
And the only thing they do is discount it. So, I mean, if they had just taken the homeless guy, not even at his word, but just tried to talk to him and maybe found out he had something that was matching up with facts, they might have been better prepared for the first stop where people start getting eaten, or they might have been ready for the girl to start biting people in the back. And instead, they just basically toss him in a corner. And then there's all the teens who are chanting about, you have to do it, you have to do it. And so we're in a time where in a lot of Asian countries, they are struggling to figure out how to deal with dating and marriage and things like that. And there's places like China where a huge portion of the men are just giving it up. And they're just like, I am going to stick with internet porn until I die because the ratio is so wacky there. There's just so many men to women.
Yeah, and they even have at least a term for the women, which makes no sense. They call them leftover women. It's just the women that can't get married by a certain age, even though it should be flipped as far as there's an excess of men. Yeah, and the thing is they're teaching the men, and there have been news features, documentaries, and there's even Chinese television that you can have access to that talks about how the guys are taught this is what you look for in a woman, and this is what you should offer, which is money, a car, a house, not a stable relationship or building a relationship, anything like that. These are the material things that you should have in order to get a woman.
Yeah, and that's part of why. Like, I was talking to my wife about how, I can't remember how we got on it, but how weird it would be, because some people get divorced or their spouse dies and then they marry somebody the age of their children. And I think, and she thinks that's just odd, like I told her I thought she was so gorgeous and was so interested in her when she was 18 and I was 23. But if I met 18-year-old her today, I wouldn't even talk to her because like I was at a different place then. And I don't want to talk to an 18-year-old. If something happened to my spouse and I chose to remarry, kind of the generalized me, not me personally, I would probably just curl up in a ball and die. But I couldn't marry somebody outside of a certain range. And so she said, oh, sure you wouldn't. And my response was, well, I'm not from a culture where I can do that, like Asia. And she had no idea. She thought it was just movies. I was like, no, Asia, a lot of men marry much younger because that's when they're finally ready to get married. And there's not the taboo of having a very young wife with a much older man because it's just been that way for a long time. And that goes back to the Train to Busan issue with these two kids, is they're trying to figure out how to exist in this world that's changing, and how many of them don't. In the case of these kids, we had a dominant female figure who walked in and said, no, we're together. Instead of it being, it's been a very male-centric culture for a long time. Just most of the Asian most of the world is very male-centric. These countries are sort of grappling with coming forward culturally. And in Train to Busan, you've got this woman who walks in, takes charge, and this man who's very passive and docile, and it ends in heartbreak. And I think there's a lot there about how do we move forward as a patriarchy in our society, which they definitely still are. and yet integrate women who have a say in things without it going terribly, terribly wrong. And parental support, again, in Asian countries, there was and still is to some extent a lot more parental influence with who you date and who you marry and things like that. Like when I talked to my father-in-law about marrying his daughter, and I explicitly said, I am not asking for your permission, but I really want your blessing. And that's how we can do it here. In a lot of Asian countries, that is not okay. It's the parents are involved. And you might, as the young man, young woman, you might find out about it years down the line that, oh, our parents have been cooking up this relationship for us, And so these kids are moving away from that traditional thing, but haven't quite found a way to be a nuclear family like we've managed to do in the United States and some of the European countries. And so a lot of their tragedy is sort of foreordained because that's the state of their culture right now. It's just everything is so up in the air. They don't know which way to go. And so what we would call millennials, I think, are having real struggles accommodating old ways and new ways and figuring out a way to make them work together.
That makes a lot of sense. I was like, do I know about this? I don't think so. And I guess I knew like little pieces of it, but I've never heard it like that succinctly, like the whole overview. So thank you.
And you get to ask questions because that's one of my favorite parts I tell people about being an author is I get to be professionally ignorant. Like it is okay for me to not know answers because that's just all potential story stuff. Like when I was a lawyer, if I admitted to anyone, oh, how do you build the space shuttle? If my answer is like, well, I have no idea, which it was, but I look kind of stupid and no one's going to pay my hourly billing, Whereas a writer, they go, well, how does that work? I'm like, beats the crap out of me. Let's go look.
It's a research opportunity.
It totally is. And I have stopped off at so many places on the side of the road and just marched up to the front door and been like, what's in your backyard? It's super embarrassing for my kids. It really is. It's so cool. I can be stupid again. It's like being a 5-year-old for the rest of my life.
I honestly think it's one of the best parts of being a writer because like I'll have some crazy ass idea and then I start researching it, which then leads to like 9 other things. And now I know all these like random facts about weird little shit that I would have never looked up.
Right.
And then what's weird is how it comes in handy all of a sudden. Like you'll be at a convention and you're at the bar with somebody and they're like, well, nobody knows this. And I'm like, hey, you know what? I actually read something about that. Like, right. I don't know the full answer, but what about this weird fact I know?
Right. Well, and it's funny because authors are like, can you take care of yourself in the apocalypse? No, I'm going to die very quickly. But I can tell you how to do a tripwire for a Yeti, just in case that ever comes in handy. Like we know so many useless facts. Yeah, and I do learn important, like things that would actually benefit me. Like I've learned how to, hotwire cars, and I've learned how to blow up buildings. And I'm sure the NSA has a huge file on me, but all that like really cool stuff that would come in handy, I don't remember. I definitely remember the Yeti tripwire thing, but anything useful, just right out my head. I wanted to talk about if the sequel is going to be any good because it's in pre-production or production right now.
This is the sequel or the remake?
Sequel.
Okay.
Yeah, Peninsula.
Because America's like, got this weird fascination where they want to remake it. And I'm like, you guys know you don't have trains, right?
Right. It'll be a segue to Busan. Just a whole bunch of, it'll be people like a big Segway marathon. It'll be all vegans wearing Crocs. And one of them.
I hope they're wearing clothes with their Crocs.
Of course. Because, they will, but they'll all be like made of organic things and hemp and stuff. And then one of them will turn into a zombie. And the big problem won't be that there's this killing machine, but they're just appalled that one of their vegan brethren would partake of meat that way. And so it would devolve. The reason the zombies would be able to get everyone is because they'd have to stop and have a discussion about whether that meat is vegan, considering they're eating a vegan, or whether it's organic because the person had pneumonia and had antibiotics and stuff. So I think that would work. I would be very curious how they do it. I mean, I would guess it would be New York. They'd have to do it like in New York or Chicago. And Chicago could be cool because they've got the L, and that could be some fun visuals as having zombies flying off the elevated train. But it's just not the same as a 200-mile-an-hour bullet train.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, but go ahead. Talk to us about the sequel.
I don't know anything about the sequel. I just know it's happening, but I'm terrified because like this was such a good movie. And so I'm not against remakes just because, I mean, I loved Ringu, whatever you want to call it. But Gore Verbinski did such a tremendous job with the American remake, The Ring. I mean, that was such a game changer, and that kind of ushered in the whole J-horror, K-horror epic. And so I don't mind remakes, but they do kind of terrify me because if the source material's really good, it's just going to be such a step down probably. And even when they nail it, like they did with The Ring, every other Ring movie that's come out has just been crap. And so it really tarnishes my enjoyment of the original. So that's my big concern, is they're going to come out with Train to Busan Part 2. And I mean, the beginning, the first one was such a big hit. Did you guys know 1 in 3 Korean people saw that movie?
No.
I read that when I was watching it this time, and that blew my mind.
Yeah, I mean, that is insane. And especially because we can imagine everybody going and seeing the Avengers, but it's like 1 in 3 Americans went and saw World War Z. No, or even worse, some Night of the Living Dead remake. It just blew me away that they would watch a horror movie, or at least something could be horror, attributed to horror, in that kind of numbers. I thought was really cool. So, I mean, it's a no-brainer that they're going to make another one, but I just am really concerned because, especially with the social commentary story, you can either choose something else to make a commentary on, and you run the risk of having it be really disjointed and almost a different part of a different series. Like, I love Night of the Living Dead, which had social commentary accidentally because George Romero said the reason they cast a black guy was because he was the only actor who showed up who didn't suck. Right. And so that was accidental. And then, they did Dawn of the Dead, which is very purposeful. But each of the movies seems so disjointed. It almost doesn't seem like the same series in a lot of ways, other than Of the Dead and George Romero. And so that's the risk with Train of Busan. Or worse, you're like, let's talk some more about the social politics, even though we've already kind of done an excellent job of it in the first one. It's either going to be a disjointed thing or a flogging a dead horse thing. And both of those, I just don't want it to tarnish this movie.
Yeah, and I really feel like there's nowhere to go. You know, like, if there's anything new to say, unless, like you say, they go in a completely different direction. And then I'm like, what's really the point? Why don't you just make a different movie, other than, of course, obviously marketing and sales? But, it's funny that you used Ringu as your example, because we just did Ringu. we just did it on the show last Monday.
Oh, awesome.
And Michael David Wilson from This Is Horror was on, and he was actually talking about Train to Busan, and I told him you were coming on, and so this whole thing has gone in a giant circle like a ring. How exciting.
That's awesome. Yes, we did it on purpose. We horror writers don't do anything on accident.
As long as everybody's talking about our show, I mean, that's all I care about.
Well, no. I will say it's funny because no publicity is the worst publicity. Anything else is fine. But it's funny. Speaking of social commentary and things like that. So I wrote a middle grade series called The Billy Saga, and I wrote it for my wife because she really likes that kind of fantasy books. And then my dad, who is a very well-esteemed horror critic and academic, he went in and for my birthday wrote a critical treatise of the Billy Saga. And it was really interesting because part of it I went, oh, he picked that up. And part of it I went, oh, I wasn't expecting him to pick that up. And a little part of it, I was like, I did not mean that, but he makes me sound very smart right here, so I will go with it.
We never pick out the good stuff. If it's totally like going to make us look bad, then we're like, no, that's not what's happening there at all. But if it's good, we're just suddenly very silent.
Oh yeah, I was brilliant in retrospect. So it's always funny when these movies come out and they're like, we intended them to be social commentary from the beginning. There's a part of me that's like, but did you really?
one of the things that gets me, at least early on, is how Suan and her father, you get to see how, I guess, disjointed or estranged their relationship is, because the dad has custody. The mom the daughter wants to go see her mother. The mother wants to see her, but the dad, who's a broker or a trader, seems to spend all of his time at work, very little time, with his child, getting to know her. And, his mother takes care of her the majority of the time. So, he sees her, buys her a present, her birthday or something, and knows so little about her, spends so little time with her, that he ends up buying her the same gift that he had gotten her for Children's Day.
Yep.
And he's thinking like, oh, I'm a great dad. I remember to get her something for her birthday. And the look on her face is kind of like, yeah, you already got me one of these.
Yeah.
You really don't know me, Dad, do you? But what kills me is when the daughter says, you only care about yourself. And then that comes back later in the film when I forget the other gentleman's name, but I refer to him as the teddy bear, because that's basically the way I see him in the film.
Yeah.
The guy who saves him initially, he's talking to her father about fatherhood and says, hey, dads get all the shit, moms get all the credit.
Such a good line.
And basically, like, don't beat up on you, not knowing about their relationship. Don't beat up on yourself for not being, you're working hard, you're doing all this stuff to take care of her. When she becomes older, she'll realize the sacrifices that you made, which even beyond Korea, that's a pretty general perspective with respect to fatherhood. Yeah. Is that, if you feel like you're an absentee father, this is the guys who aren't absentee fathers, by the way. Mm-hmm. If you feel like because you're working so hard to provide and you don't get that time, hey, there's going to be that point where your kids do realize, like, oh, shit, I was able to have this because of dad, or I was able to have this. Yeah. And it doesn't matter what generation you are. You start to feel like, God, I had this conversation with my dad before I had this conversation with James, where I'm like, holy shit, I feel like I'm working so much. I don't get to spend time with my kid. Yeah. And, we've talked each other off of cliffs, and it's kind of like, oh, well, no, I'm going to get to the point where I don't have to do this, and she'll know, or they'll know, and everything will be fine. Mm-hmm. But that stuck with me throughout the film, that whole idea of you only care about yourself, or the way that the daughter sees this. But I saw so many people in this film caring only about their own survival. So just beyond this idea that the dad is selfish, or the belief that the dad is selfish, but you see throughout the film that there are all these moments where somebody is willing to sacrifice somebody else before, rather than save someone else in a lot of cases. Yeah. And the times that somebody does try to save someone, you see how it doesn't always have a positive result. Yeah.
Yeah. I think, we've talked a lot about the actors, and I think that main character, Seok Woo, he gets glossed over because he does a good job disappearing into what is intentionally a very middle of the ground character. I mean, he's complicit in the whole thing because he has traded stocks of that company that caused all this problem. So he is part of the problem, but he's not, he's not that evil CEO guy. He is somebody I really kind of, I very much sympathized with him, not just because he works hard. I mean, I do know my kids have a PlayStation, like I would not buy them that level of gift the same, but I've definitely come home, been like, here, I bought you shampoo because you needed it. And they've gone, you bought this last week, so I'm not 100% dialed in. And so I sympathized with that to some extent. And I really sympathized with just the idea. Yeah, he was complicit, but also he's a dad and he does want the best for his kids. And that's where my wife and I were talking, about all these people who are getting together to urge that there be no stops to business and things like that. And And that really scares me from the point of view that that's how this whole thing backslides and we can get back into an epidemiological crisis. But at the same time, I can't badmouth those people because I'm very lucky. I have been able to work at home. My wife is very lucky. She has been able to work at home. If I'm somebody who, owns a restaurant and my entire livelihood just went down the toilet within a space of 2 months, I can't say that I wouldn't be out there going, we need to get back to work, because that is just so many of those people. I like to believe so many of those people aren't crazy. They're just desperate, and their priorities have shifted from immediate safety to we are going to be homeless in another month. And so I think that this dad was a good representation of that. I mean, he made a lot of objectively bad choices, but at no point was it like he wasn't a philanderer. He's talking to his mom and there was no like, you shouldn't have dallied with your receptionist. His vice is working really hard so that he can provide. And even, he takes his daughter. He's like, you're really sad. I will take you to the train. I'll make sure you get to Busan. He didn't just drop her on the train. He took her. Right. And so he is not an unreasonable human. He is a totally normal human making a lot of the same choices I think a lot of us would. Well, you can turn down a huge stock dividend because it's a small chance you might have a portfolio that includes, B&P, whatever petroleum, that's going to spill oil everywhere. And do you do that? Do you say, well, I'll just take that money out of my family's mouths on a chance? I'd be like, well, I really hope it's not investing in that, and everything's so interconnected at this point. I'm a small time. I have little bits of investments just trying to build a retirement fund. I have no frickin' clue what they are. And I could be like, oh, did you know you have a 3% chance of stock of, terroristrs.com or something like that? It would totally shock me. And I'd feel really bad about it. But, I'm not doing much to avoid that because at some point I just need to turn over the details to people and hope they make the right choice. And that's really how things fall apart, too, is we are so interconnected. They talk about the Internet of Things, and then if one of the big pieces of that falls down, like our refrigerator stops working, we don't have transport lines anymore because all of it's done over the Internet. All of these things fall apart. But I think we're also in that stage where like the Internet of people now, like if civilization breaks down, I think I'm a reasonably capable person. Like I do martial arts. So physically I could do that stuff. I know how to fire a gun. I am okay at that stuff. Could I get my car to start? No, because it's got some onboard computer system, and we've got so many delegated pieces of all of our lives now. It's a supply chain that's very fragile. And I think Train to Busan really illustrated that very well. And in that situation, the only thing they really could do at that point that would have made a difference was to silence the voice that was advocating for control, because that's all that businessman wanted. He wanted to be in charge and tell everyone what to do. And so I think, come the apocalypse, that's the one thing that's going to be the most dangerous, is that person who stands up and shouts, we're doing this horrible thing now because apocalypse. And everyone else just goes, okay, that's civilization's breakdown.
Well, and that's how you end up with the governor from The Walking Dead.
Yeah, right.
The one guy who's like, no, we'll do whatever it takes to survive. And when you give into that, you're suddenly making some really crazy choices,
Yeah, some very dubious decisions, yeah.
Sitting here, and when you were talking about how he agrees to go on the train with the daughter, I was thinking, wow, what happens if he doesn't? He would be so sad when blah, blah, blah. And then I was like, no. But no, maybe he gets infected even faster based on what we've seen. And I don't know which way that goes. But holy shit, can you imagine if he survived and knew he put his kid on this train?
Man.
It's not like he knows where she is at the end.
Yeah. Yeah. That is we actually have, like, at our house, we have Sharpies, and we've told our kids, like, if something happens, go to the house and we will write on on something where we've gone, because we worry about that separation. And I'm not like a doomsday person. I'm not getting a bunker or anything, but we lived in California and there's big earthquakes there. And, my wife and I lived through 9/11 as a lot of people did. And it really fundamentally changed us by looking at and saying, wow, we can have a breakdown here where we live. And that's frightening. So, yeah, I can't imagine having sent my kid off and then finding out, oh, well, everybody who went there died.
I don't think that's doomsday prepping at all. Like, I would much rather that my kid thinks I'm utterly insane when I say these things. And then if we ever need to use it, hey, you fucking know where I put it,
Yep. Totally.
I'm not even going to say I told you so, because I'm just glad that you listened.
Yep. I had a martial arts teacher who would often say, it's an old saying, but he would say, I'd much rather be a warrior in a garden than a gardener in the middle of a war. And he wasn't saying gardeners suck. He was just saying it's better to be over-prepared than not prepared. And I think we're seeing more and more of that in our lives. And I've actually reached out to people like every week. I have a mailing list. And if any of your listeners want to get on it, like I give away free books and I've really doubled down. Just go to my website, writteninsomnia.com, and you can sign up there. But I've really doubled down on sending out deals on books and free stuff. And like this week, I'm going to send out my old martial arts teacher. Actually, I talked to him. I was like, you should put your curriculum on super sale. And he did that because he's trying to help people out as well. So I'm going to send an email about that. And I think that's really the way we forestall the worst outcomes, is using these moments as an excuse to find new ways to care, rather than as a reason that we can distance ourselves, not just socially, but emotionally and spiritually to some extent. Like we need to be connected. And when moments like this happen, Train to Busan, again, excellent example. Everybody who locks themselves in a car thinking, now I'm safe, and refuses to move from that car gets killed faster. And the only people who made it to any length of time were the ones who moved as the situation dictated and who accepted others into their group. I mean, at no point did the survivors look at the hobo and say, no, he's not allowed because he's stinky and I think he pooped himself. They pulled people into their group. And I really think that we need to be doing that as well. And when we talk about hunkering down for this current situation, we need to be hunkering down in a way that we spread out as well to other people, and say, hey, do you need toilet paper? Because I do have some. And I know you mentioned on social media, you don't. I live down the street. So here you go, and we can do things like that. In spite of having to be isolated, we can still watch out for each other.
I think that's huge. Yeah.
You mentioned that the aspect of coming together in times like this. This is something I complimented the zombies with, or the flesh eaters, or whatever you want to call them in this, because they're working together.
Yeah.
There is no class distinction, racial distinction, gender distinction with the zombies. It's kind of like they have their goal, which is, let's assume the goal is their survival or their spread. And they're doing what they need to do, destroying themselves, property, limbs, all that stuff to do what they need to do. And it's you got to look at it this way, whether it's a virus or catastrophe or anything like that, it's going to do what it's going to do.
Yeah.
And the problem that you see with these disaster films, with these monster movies, a lot of times it comes down to, it's a lot of people not working together.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, that's what you start to see in times of crisis. When you're talking about helping out neighbors, that when the crisis first hit in the U.S., and you saw people hoarding toilet paper, hand sanitizer, Clorox wipes, all that stuff, James and I joked, and we're like, these are the assholes in every zombie movie. These are the assholes in every zombie movie.
Oh my gosh.
And they're convinced, I'm going to survive. And a friend of mine posted on social media in response to all the protests, the open up protests and whatever. And he jokingly said, hey, if you recognize anybody that on these live feeds, where they live, odds are they probably hoarded the toilet paper and hand sanitizer. So nobody's going to be in their house right now. So go take their stuff.
Totally. It always bites you in the butt. I mentioned, I think beforehand, I'm a church going guy, and this isn't like a proselytizing thing, just it kind of illustrates that I was really proud of one of my church leaders, because we're in my faith, we're encouraged to have a year's supply of food on hand, like, a storage. And one of my church leaders stood up and said, "You realize that is not for you to survive in a time of crisis. That's so that you can help that many more people." And I was like, that is awesome.
Yeah.
And if I really think we have it within ourselves to overcome, and we have it within ourselves to do what's necessary to not just survive, but to thrive over time. But it really does more and more rely upon selflessness, because we are so interconnected. I mean, 1,000 years ago, where your average village was all of 8 people, if a village was wiped out, no worries. Because there were all these other little tiny tribes that were available to keep things moving. But now if a village gets wiped out, chances are they make something important. And, they create the transistor that goes in everybody's cell phone, and no one's cell phone will work anymore. And so whether we realize it or not, we really do. It benefits our self-interest to help other people as much as possible.
Definitely.
Well, I think that's one of the lessons that we take from this film. Like you said, they're always working together. The people who don't make it.
Yep.
The people who try to shut people out, they don't end well, Not that everybody ends well anyway, but yeah.
But there's a sense that it continues. And not only that, but that the final part where the people who do survive are rescued by the establishment. But the thing that works with it is not that they're rescued by the establishment, but they're rescued by the soldiers based on their proof of humanity. Right. And in the end, it's the little girl singing that tells them, "Oh, these are humans." And again, I think that's how it's going to be, is in the event of some massive catastrophe, the people who get helped, obviously in the first minutes, are going to be the ones who scream the loudest. That's just human nature. But over time, it tends to settle down to who's going to get help is the people who are needed for helping others. I am appalled by reports over the world of people being mad at nurses and doctors for going into stores. It's like, you know what, you guys, I hope one of these days you are shot and look up in the ER and realize that's the same nurse that you were, slashing their tires or whatever, because chances are that nurse is still going to save you, even if they know it's you. And so I really think we need to prioritize the people who help, the people who give, and not the megalomaniacs who want to run the world, but the people who actually make the world possible.
I think that's a fantastic place to end this. I don't know that we can say anything better than that.
I didn't have anything better than that.
I know I don't have anything better than that. So MichaelBrent, why don't you tell our listeners where to find you online? Tell them where to sign up for your mailing list again.
So online, I am at writteninsomnia.com. Written Insomnia, stories to keep you up all night. You can also find me on Facebook or Twitter. And again, just if you Google the word MichaelBrent, all one word, you will find my website, my Amazon page, everything. As of now, 100% of my books, bestsellers, box sets, everything is 99 cents for the ebook, because I'm aware that people, they're locked up and they need some relief and they need some entertainment, and we don't have a lot of money to work with, a lot of us. So everything's 99 cents. I mean, you could go out and buy 2 months worth of reading, because I've written like 40 books for $40 right now. And I will keep that on as long as I can. Here's a really nice thing just that I want to share is I did that, and just the way Amazon and the other platforms pay out, they give you a much smaller percentage of the royalty when you go below a certain threshold. And so I wasn't taking like, a 2/3 cut. I was taking an 80 or 90% pay cut. And I talked it over with my wife, and we decided it was the right thing to do. I'm an indie, so that's all my money that was going away. And people responded. I said, I'm doing this. I will keep it up as long as I can afford to. And my network of people has been telling all their friends, and their friends told their friends, so that I can afford to keep doing it, because I couldn't have done it more than a week or two. And now it's going into like its fourth week, I think. And it's still going strong, that I'm selling enough books. I've taken a little pay cut, but I'm selling enough books that I can keep going at that level. So that was astounding to me. Just, my numbers tripled so that I could keep going. So I'm happy to keep that going, and I hope I can keep it going until things return to normal or beyond that. I mean, I would love to be able to provide that kind of thing. So thanks to everybody who's participated and shared. And if you haven't, jump on and grab a couple books. They're cheap.
That is really cool. Wow. Fantastic. Well, thank you once again for coming on the show.
My pleasure.
I always enjoy when you come on, so hit me up anytime, and let's do this again in the future.
Awesome. Sounds good. It's always fantastic talking to you guys. I really appreciate it.
So that wraps up this week. So as always, I am James Sabata.
And I'm Don Guillory.
And we'll see you next week here on the Necronama.com.